Sequestration was a poison pill that originally was designed to force Republicans and Democrats to sit down together and reach a bargain that would entail increasing some revenues and also budget cuts. And the looming axe that would fall out there was sequestration, which was believed at the time that because sequestration was so terrible, that would force the two parties together and come to an agreement. Well, we know that they never did, and we know now ever since 2011, we have been living with sequestration. While we have been living with sequestration, the world has turned into a place of enormous turmoil and threats to the security of our nation, which has escalated dramatically in those intervening years. And at some point, I'd like to come to the floor, maybe later, showing the world in 2011 and the world in 2015. And thanks to a feckless foreign policy and leading from behind and abandoning our allies, this administration has caused the world to be in more turmoil, not in just the opinion of this senator, but every witness before our Armed Services Committee has agreed on one thing. These witnesses have been Madeleine Albright and Henry Kissinger and George Shultz and Brent Scowcroft and Zbig Brzezinski. And I could go on and on. The smartest minds in America we have had before our committee, and every one of them has said exactly the same thing. No matter whether they served under Republican or Democrat administrations, they said they have never seen the world in more turmoil. So sequestration, if there ever was a reason for it, is long gone. And the fact is that we are not going to be able not only to defend this nation, but we are going to put American lives at risk. That is not the opinion of this senator from Arizona. It is the opinion of every one of our service leaders that we have had before our committee. So now we're not repealing sequestration, but we have this, and it is a gimmick, the overseas contingency operations, which were not designed for this, but is now a way of increasing our spending on defense. Now, I would much rather have had us face the issues square head-on and increase our defense spending in a normal way in the budgetary process. That didn't happen. So now, as we begin our votes on the budget, I'm faced with two choices, and this body is faced with two choices: either the increases in overseas contingency operations or go back to sequestration. Those numbers are not acceptable. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to go ahead and pass this budget and give our military what they need. In fact, they need more than what is in this budget before us, but at least it is some ability to address the challenges to our nation. Now, Mr. President, I just want to mention that we're not only talking about defense of the nation, we are talking about the lives of the men and women who are serving in the military, are in the view of our military commanders, that their lives are being put at risk. Now, I don't know how anyone in this body, no matter how they feel about defense, could vote in a way that would put the lives of the men and women serving in the military at greater risk. I don't know how you would do that. All four service chiefs, questioning from Senator King of Maine, American lives are being put at risk. The Secretary of Defense testified before the committee, and I quote, "Sequestration threatens our military readiness, the size of our warfighting forces, the capability of our air naval fleets, and ultimately the lives of our men and women in uniform." A national defense panel put together with some of the brightest minds in America, quote, "Unless sequestration is reversed, the United States could find itself in a position where it must either abandon an important national interest or enter a conflict for which it is not fully prepared. I don't know anybody who is more respected than General Brent Scowcroft, by all. Quote, absolutely, I would repeal sequestration. It is a terrible way to determine force structure strategy or anything like it. It's undermining our ability to do what we need to do to retain alert for the contingencies of the world. General James Mattis, no foe in the world can wreak such havoc on our security that mindless sequestration is achieving. General Jack Keane, sequestration is not only irresponsible in the face of emerging challenges, it is downright reckless. General Ray Odierno, sequestration is the single greatest barrier to the effectiveness of our armed forces, to its training readiness and modernization. I assure you that ending sequestration is the most prudent measure we can take for ensuring that our military is able to meet the demands of global security now in the future. General Odierno went on to say, the choices we must make to meet the sequestration level funding are forcing us to reduce our Army to a size and with limited capabilities that I am not comfortable with. If we follow this path to its end, we will find a hollow Army. If we do not have the resources to train and equip the force, our soldiers, our young men and women, are the ones who will pay the price, potentially with their lives. That's from the Chief of Staff of the United States Army. The young men and women are the ones who will pay the price, potentially with their lives. General Mark Welch, the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, the vulnerability sequestration introduced in our force will encourage our adversaries, worry our allies, limit the number of concurrent operations we conduct, and increase the risk to the men and women who fight America's next war. Secretary of State George Shultz, one of the most revered men in America. Sequestration seems to me like legislative insanity. Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, I'm very concerned about sequestration and the deep cuts that have been taken. I think it jeopardizes America's military reach. Director of National Intelligence said, but just based on my best professional judgment and having served in this business for a long time, I'm very concerned about it. And if we revert to sequestration in 2016, the damage to the intelligence community will be quite profound. The Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, in an age when we are less certain about what will happen next, but quite certain that it will happen more quickly, we will be further away and less ready than we need to be. Simply stated, sequestration will result in a dramatic change in how we protect our nation and how we promote our national interests. General John Kelly, he's the commander of U.S. Southern Command. If sequestration returns in fiscal year 16, our ability to support national security objectives, including conducting many of our essential missions, will be significantly undermined. I would tell you in Latin America, the Southern Command will be, just simply put, a catastrophe. It will essentially put me out of business. He goes on to say, if sequestration happens, I will be down to maybe one Coast Guard, maybe two Coast Guard cutters. That means, this is the commander of the Southern Command who is responsible for our Southern Hemisphere. He said, that means of the 158 metric tons of cocaine I would expect to get this year, I'll probably, if I'm lucky, will get 20 tons. Admiral William Gortney, who's the commander of the Northern Command, sequestration targets both current and future readiness and risks a hollow force, undertrained and underprepared for today's emerging threats. My friends, I will come to the floor one more time with a map of the Middle East and a map of other parts of the world where the United States is under almost unprecedented threat. So we are faced with the prospect of threats to the United States of America and the men and women who are serving it in uniform, or moving forward with OCO, which is a very unsatisfactory but a way through this at least for 1 year. And I would point out that this is only for 1 year, and the ability of the Defense Department to plan is in great jeopardy, makes it incredibly difficult. But we are where we are. I understand the need for, and my friends on both sides of the aisle, that we need to increase defense spending. There's a lot of needs in the country, and all of them are serious and compelling. But I don't know anything more compelling right now than what our military leaders have told us, and that is that we're putting the lives of the men and women serving in uniform at risk. So I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, as dire as the deficit is, and it is a challenge to the future of our children as well, but right now we are facing a far greater risk. I hope we can pass this budget with the OCO in it, and then sit down and seriously work to repeal this Damocles sword that is called sequestration. Mr. President, I yield the floor.